I've heard a lot of advice on scientific and medical writing in my training and career, some good and some bad. But one piece of advice that I hear again and again is flawed advice. And that advice is to read the literature and mimic what you read. I've heard many versions of this. Just read examples in the literature to know what to do. Use this paper as a model to know what to write. Read papers and emulate them. This advice is well-intentioned, but not constructive. And in this video, I'm going to share the 3 biggest problems with this advice and how you can build on this advice in a more constructive way. And in case we haven't met, hello, my name is Crystal. I'm a trained biomedical scientist turned clinical researcher and now scientific and medical editor. Since 2011, I've collaborated with researchers to publish in high-impact journals and secure federal and foundation funding, and I've trained thousands of researchers and other professional writers all over the world to equip them with the principles, resources, and systems that they need to write well. So the first reason why the advice of mimicking what you read is bad advice is that you have a different story to tell. In other words, you have the data, the analysis, the language that you need to tell a particular story. But when you try to mimic what you read, you are using a model that told a different story with different data, different analysis, and even different language. And without adequate training and experience in writing, you don't have the principles or instructions you need to be able to dissect the writing in that model story to write your own story. Now, maybe you had an invested mentor, but they likely didn't get formal training either. So then you're left thinking, I need to write this story without training or a guide? To me, this is a lot like someone giving you all the reagents and the equipment that you need to run an SDS page without a procedure and telling you to use agarose gel electrophoresis as a model to run the SDS page. Or it's like someone gave you all the equipment that you need to complete an electrocardiogram or an EKG on a patient without any training, and then telling you to use an electroencephalogram or EEG as a model to do the EKG. These practices would not happen in a lab or in a clinic, yet this is how many scientists, clinicians, and other researchers are forced to learn how to write. Now, if you're not familiar with either of these methods, you can also think of it like baking. So imagine someone giving you everything that you need to make a cake, all the ingredients, but no recipe. And then they tell you that you can use pie as a model to make that cake. Even a skilled baker would need a lot of trial and error to bake that cake. And that trial and error takes time, energy, and hard work. Have you seen the Great British Baking Show? When the contestants need to mimic a recipe, they are highly skilled bakers. Yet when they need to mimic something without a recipe, sometimes it goes okay, and many other times it does not. Now, the second reason that mimicking is a problem is that the literature is plagued with poor writing. And if you mimic poor writing, you will write poorly as well. Now, you might be thinking, well, if it's been published or funded, doesn't that mean it's good writing? Actually, no. Just because something has been published or funded does not mean that it's good writing. Have you ever read an article and thought, how did this get published? So without adequate training and the right skills, you may not be able to accurately dissect whether the example you think you should mimic is good or bad writing. So you may unknowingly mimic poor writing. But this is not your fault. This is how many researchers and even professional scientific and medical writers are forced to learn, because most organizations do not provide adequate training in writing. And this is surprising because their success depends on your success. And that's why many academic institutions and research organizations put so much pressure on you to publish and secure funding. But just because they don't provide adequate training doesn't mean that writing well is not important or that you wouldn't benefit from training, which is why I'm so glad that you are here with me right now. The third reason that mimicking is a problem is the thinking that complex writing is academic. In other words, you might try to impress readers with fancy writing. Have you met people with this mindset? Many authors will use complex language because they think that it makes them sound smarter and seem more prestigious. But complex writing actually has the opposite effect. It's like telling someone that they get to hike to this incredible view of rolling hills and a beautiful ocean, but they have to trudge through an overgrown forest to get there. They have to try to find the path and move the dead limbs and brush out of the way, not even knowing if they are heading in the right direction to the top. And so this is really hard work for a hiker. And so when you use complex writing, you will create hard mental work for readers because they will have to trudge through the complex language to understand the message that you want to convey. And this hard work will cause them to feel exhausted and frustrated and even annoyed. And they will associate those feelings with your writing and with you. And those feelings mean that you are not making a good impression. Now, have you read a paper that felt like you had to trudge through a mess of words to understand what authors wanted to convey? What did you think about the author? So rather than making hikers trudge through an overgrown forest, you want to build a clear, beautiful path that guides them to the top. That way, hikers can have an easy journey and can enjoy looking at the trees and the rock wall and the view and the ocean. And they can do all of this without any unnecessary effort. And you can create a similar experience in your writing. You can create a path that guides readers through the story so they can enjoy reading about your science. And if it were you, if you had the choice, which route would you rather take? Would you rather trudge through an overgrown forest or enjoy a clearly guided journey? Very rarely do I meet someone who would prefer the adventure of trudging through an overgrown forest. So if mimicking what you read is bad advice, what should you do instead? The best advice I can give you is to get training. If you have an invested mentor, that is a great start, but it's not enough. They may not have had training in how to write, and so they may also have poor writing habits that they could pass on to you. So I really recommend studying books on writing, and not just reading them, but studying them and practicing what you learn. Just reading books on writing is like watching baseball and expecting to know how to play baseball. You really need to dedicate time and energy to getting out on the field, studying the support, and practicing. That's where the learning magic happens. Also, read all sorts of books, not just books on scientific and medical writing, but also on the basics of writing. And read nonfiction and fiction, and blog articles and news articles. There is so much you can learn by reading different styles of writing. I also recommend enrolling in a course. Your university or organization may offer a course, and if they do, that is fantastic. There are also free courses out there that you can join. I also have a course called Scientific Writing Simplified that hundreds of researchers and other professional writers have taken with lots of incredible success stories. And the course has a wonderful community with events and group coaching and other activities to help you hone your skills. In case you're curious, I'll add a link to the description box. I would be thrilled to have you. But even if you don't learn from me, learn from someone who can give you the skills you need. And someone who has published a lot of manuscripts might not be the best person. Their writing might have met the bar to getting published, but as you likely know, there is a lot of bad writing that gets published. And getting published is just a milestone, but it's not the ultimate goal. The real goal is to write a clear, memorable paper that gets cited, that gets recognized, and that makes an impact in your field. And as you learn and study and practice, analyze the writing in the literature so that you can notice good and bad parts of the writing, because no writing is perfect. And then you can choose what to mimic to strengthen your writing. You can choose structures and language that will help you to write well. In fact, there's some common language in literature that I recommend you avoid because it can damage your credibility. You can learn all about it in this video. And if there's something else that you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments. I create these videos for you, so I want to make sure that I'm creating something that you will find valuable. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and I hope to see you in the next video.